Hi guys, I'm Kimberly from the Fat Quarter Shop, and today I am going to attempt the one charm pack challenge. So today I have selected the Lighthearted Charm Pack by Camille Ross Kelly and Moda Fabrics. I have 1 yard of a Bella Solid Color 200, and I have 1 pad of the 2 by 4 inch Flying Geese paper pads. So we're going to start there and see what I can make. So whenever I start a quilt, I start putting all the information and fill it out as I go so that I can always refer back to. And I'm using the Busy Bee Quilt Binder page by Lori Holt. So here I've just wrote out kind of what I'm starting with, and I will make blocks, and as I go I will update this page so I can always remember what I did. So the first thing I'm going to do is, since I have been given a 2 by 4 inch Flying Geese paper, I'm going to see how many Flying Geese I can make using 1 charm pack. Now when you look at this paper, you make 2 Flying Geese per paper. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to look at how many fabrics I have that I can actually use that will contrast enough with my Bella Solid. So I'll start that, and I'll put them in rows of 10 so that it's easy for me to tell how many I have. Now I have starched this whole charm pack, so it already has pre-shrunk, and I did starch all of my background. So these are backgrounds, and I might and might not use them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start with my dark prints, and this is 26, so I'm just going to cut enough to make that many. I am going to come back and use some of these, but I'm going to start with my dark first because that's just the way that I work best. So if I look here, it's going to tell me for placement 1, which is my background fabric, to cut a 5 3/4 inch rectangle. Okay, so I'm just going to cut 4 strips 5 3/4. Actually, I'm going to cut 3. This is just a guess. I want to give myself a little bit left over for borders or other things. So I'm just going to cut 3 strips. We'll see how many that gets us. And then if I need to cut more, I will. Kind of when I'm doing something like this that's just kind of winging it, I just kind of cut and go and see what happens. So that's 5 3/4. So now I'm going to cut this into 5 inch increments. So that's going to give me 24. So I'll need more, but we're just going to start with that for now. So when you're working with foundation paper like this, you don't have to make it, it's cut 5 3/4 by 5 inches, but it doesn't have to be exact. So when you notice when I was cutting, I wasn't cutting too accurately. What I like to do is just take the back of this off. I'm going to take about 4 or 5 sheets. I'm actually going to trim them down to this cut line. And I'm cutting on the dotted line, not the solid lines. Then I'm going to take a add a quarter plus ruler. I'm going to crease between the 1 and 2 and the 2 and 3. So I've creased here and here. I'm going to make 1 to kind of show you how I do it. I'm going to put, since it's a solid, it doesn't have to be right side up or right side down. I'm going to just glue this center circle part, put this down, and then on this side I am going to trim a 1/4 inch away here, and this little add a quarter ruler makes it super easy to do that. And I'm going to trim between the 1 and 2 and the 2 and 3 on both sides. And the reason I only put the glue in this part is because I want it to stay. And the reason I want it to stay is I'm going to be adding triangles out here, and I don't want this to move once I've cut it. So this is going to make 2 Flying Geese. 1 is here and 1 is here. So I'm going to look again on this inside cover and see what it says to cut the placements 2 and 3. It says 3 1/2 inch squares cut on the diagonal. So I'm going to make 2 green ones first. So I'm just going to cut it 4 inches because I like to have a lot of room. I'm not going to cut it 3 1/2. And I'm not going to cut it exact because we're working with foundation paper. And with foundation paper, you only have to be exact in the cutting once you've pieced it. I'm going to keep these 2 together and these 2 together. So that's going to give me 1 Flying Geese and another Flying Geese. So I will just make sure to follow that. I'm going to put these right sides together. So I'm going to sew on the number 2 line. And I sew from way out here all the way across past the paper. So I also use a size 90 needle and a super short stitch length. Once I have that done, I'll do the other side, number 2, and do the same thing, and I'll show you what I do. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just press this And I want you to see that I have them on the number 2s. So just press flat, press to one side, and then I'm gonna add to the number 3 side. So right here, I'm gonna pull this up, trim this, that's why I've already trimmed. And then here, I'm gonna pull this up and trim here. And this is 1, so you can just put your fabrics here. From here, you will press flat, press to one side, and then we're gonna trim. And this that I didn't pre-trim, you're gonna see that's gonna fall right off. So now what you wanna do is you wanna cut on these outside lines right here. Not these lines, because that's where you sewed, but this finishes at 2 by 4, which means unfinished 2.5 by 4.5, and there's already a Creative Grids ruler that size. So what I prefer to do is just put that ruler right on there. First, cut in the center. And that is your flying geese. Now you can see the paper, it came out a little bit different, but because this is exactly 2.5 by 4.5, it will be accurate. And then you can see you have 2 flying geese, the fabrics match, and I'm just gonna pull the paper off now. If you've used a really short stitch length, the paper should just come right off. And that is how you make 2 flying geese at one time with very little waste from a charm pack. It uses less fabric because you're cutting on the diagonal first and adding instead of doing a corner square and then trimming. So you get the most use with this paper. So now what my goal is gonna be, like I said, I'm gonna take all those dark fabrics I had and I'm gonna make flying geese. Then I'm going to stop, probably take a break, and then I'm gonna make some ones with light fabric and then decide what I'm going to do. So I'm just gonna start the timer and I'm just gonna go for it. What my goal is to use as much fabric as I can to make this as big as possible. So these are the only 2 not used. So I think the easiest thing to do here is I'm going to do 1 row. So I'm going to cut these into 2.5 by 4.5 inch rectangles. Okay, so now what I want to do is just take record of what did I actually make. So I'm putting 26 flying geese 2.5 by 4.5 unfinished. And then let's see how many rectangles we have. So 13. And then I made these with darks and mediums, and I did my rectangles with lights. So here what I want to do is just kind of look at it. How much space do I want between here? But also I need to know the length of this. 13 times 2 plus 1/2 inch. So it should be 4.5 by 26.5. Should be the row size. I think 1.5 finished is nice. So that means what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut these 2 inches. So I'm gonna draw this out. It's gonna help me do the math on what I need to cut. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut these 2 inches by 26.5. That's gonna give me 1.5 inch finished. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get alphabets and I'm gonna label the left side row 1, row 2, and row 3. And by labeling it, on the left, I won't have to rethink about which way it's going. So this side isn't ironed, but this side is. And like I said, I need two 2 by 26.5 inch rectangles. So what I'm going to do is on this fold, put the line on my Creative Grids ruler and cut, rotate your fabric, and I'm going to cut a 4-inch piece. So this is going to give me a lot of room to use for my borders. Subcut this into 2 inches. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to lay both of these on with the line on the mat. I'm going to chop it off. From here, I'm going to put pins at the 26.5 inch at the 0. Move this back. I'm going to take row 1 and I need to pin this to the bottom. Row 2, put this at the bottom. So what I will do is pin on the edge and then just pin at least once in every flying geese, because you can sew faster that way. And I am going to leave these alphabetties on so I don't forget where I'm at after I sew and iron. Okay, so I'm going to go to the sewing machine, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sewing out here. Once I get onto this flying geese, I'm going to do a back stitch. I'm going to go all the way across, back stitch, and then sew off. What that does is it gives me a nice and secure edging. And a lot of people don't backstitch, but when I start adding borders and rows, that added backstitch really, I think, gives it a nice touch. Now from here, I'm going to line up a Creative Grids ruler with this line and chop this off at this point. And if you just add your borders without measuring, it might work for you. I just think it will sometimes get wavy. Okay, so we have 1, 2, and 3. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to attach these two first. Add row 3. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate what I think the table runner center should be. So I think it should be 15.5 by 26.5. So now I need to figure out what I want to do for borders. I could just bind it like this. I could put skinny. So these were cut at 2 inches. I could just put 2 inches here. I could put 2 inches here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut 4 strips from my leftover background at 2.5 inches. I'm not going to cut those down. I'm going to just use pins like I did earlier to make sure I don't make any mistakes. So that's super cute. Now I'm going to figure out what the finished size is supposed to be. It should be 19.5 by 30.5. So after I have this finished, what I need to do is figure out my binding and my backing and my label. So I think this will look really nice. So those are going to be my 2 fabrics, binding and backing. And I'm going to piece my backing. But what I want to do is find a label that I think matches. And I bought these from Sweetwater Label Company online. So I'm going to go with this one because it's got aqua and red. What I want to do is take the leftover charm packs I have and border this so that it'll stick out against this. So I'm going to use this white on white. So what I want to do is just border this just a tiny bit. So I'm actually going to add the 2 side ones. So I'm basically going to add this, trim it, add the top and bottom, and then we're going to trim that down. And I'll show you how I'm going to do my backing. So I need to figure out where I'm going to put that on this backing. So I could put it down here, but if I do that, I have to add a bunch and I have to hope it's centered. So I'm probably going to put it right here. And I'm going to do the math on what I'll need to cut to complete this backing with this beautiful floral. And now let's just talk about the quilt and what I came up with today using 1 charm pack and 1 yard of fabric. So when you look at the front, I made 26 flying geese that are 2.5 by 4.5 inches unfinished. I made 13 2.5 inch by 4.5 inch rectangles using my lights, and I used this layout that you can see. For my sashings, these are 2 inch by 26.5, and there's 2 of them. For my borders, there's 2 2.5 by 26.5 inch strips and 2 2.5 by 19.5 inch strips. My label I put in the center. I'm gonna add 2 1/4 inch by 19 inch strips this way, and then I'm going to add 15 inch by 40 inch strips that way, this is my backing, and this is my binding from Fat Quarter Shop. So to make this entire quilt, you need 1 charm pack, 1 yard of your background, half a yard binding, 1 yard backing, and 1 pad of the 2" by 4" finished Flying Geese paper. And you don't use the entire pad, so you'll have more for your next project. So here is my 1 charm pack challenge. I really loved doing this. It was so fun to just get some fabric and figure out what I was gonna do. Here's your layout if you wanna make yours just like mine. Make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.